Hello, hello, and welcome to School Leader Soundbites. I'm your host, Veronica Sofer, and I have the pleasure of coming to you once a week to talk about all things K-12, leadership, branding, marketing, advertising, community engagement, all of those things that help our school systems be incredibly successful. So if you are a new leader in the K-12 space, welcome to School Leader Soundbites. You can hit subscribe. We don't want you to miss any episodes of School Leader Soundbites. And if you are watching our YouTube or Facebook, drop some comments. I love to circle back and connect with you. And now on School Leader Soundbites, I come in with tips, strategies, observations, some of the things I've learned from working with different school districts all around the country. And today I want to talk about conquering resistance as a new K-12 leader. So for some of you, you've been able to matriculate up from the campus level, from principalships up to central office, maybe at the assistant superintendent or deputy superintendent level, and now you're in the seat. And sometimes, depending on where you're coming from or where you're going, you are dealing with new people, new personalities, a new culture, a new way of doing things. And so I have, in the last couple of weeks in particular, spent a lot of time with new leaders adjusting to their new culture and helping to lay the groundwork for what their leadership is going to look like. So today I want to talk about coming in as a new leader and struggling when you've got some resistance. So there's a few things I want to touch on. Number one, there's some great leadership tools out there. Most of us have already tapped into those. Some great books on leadership, anything by Maxwell, Brene Brown. We've all gone to really great conferences and heard speakers. But there's a couple of things that I really think that gets missed when we are actually in the seat and not being reminded every day by listening to some of our mentors. And the first thing I want to touch on is authenticity. When you are coming in with the new staff, oftentimes you're given advice by the board that's hired you or by the recruiters and the new staff, the new chief of staff, the new deputy superintendent, whoever your number two is, they've given you advice on how to show up for the community and how to show up for your cabinet or your leadership team. If you're a new communications leader, maybe you've got 4 or 5 people already on your team and you're trying to figure out how best to navigate them. Oftentimes you're hiring your chief HR officer or whoever it is that hired you will give you some advice and give you some strategies on the types of personalities that you are going to be working with. And one of the pitfalls that I see is that we take that advice and I've done it too. I've done it myself. We take that advice and we use it as a roadmap instead of tapping into what we already know, which is how to show up for ourselves authentically. Here's the thing I want you to remember. When you interviewed and you gave them your interview packet and you sat and you worked on your entry plan, you came from a place of authenticity. You leveraged your skills, your talents, all the things you're really great at to be able to help you ease into this system. In other words, you shared with them things that you know work because they're proven and you've done them before. You've been in touch with who you are as a leader and those leadership steps. So show up authentically. That doesn't mean you don't take their advice. It doesn't mean you don't take heed when you know you've got some challenging personalities that you've inherited on your team. It just means that you still tap into what you know to be true about yourself and your leadership. So the first mistake I see people make, especially when I'm coaching new K-12 leaders, is they have put aside what they know to work well with teams and they're not showing up authentically. They might be showing up as someone that they think they want that organization to see. And that can oftentimes really be to your detriment because you are not honoring the energy that you have as a leader and the pathway that you have already laid out for yourself. So a couple of things, check in with yourself pretty regularly. Is this activity that I'm going to do, is it true to who I am? Are these types of emails that I'm sending ones that are going to be received well and true to my voice? Am I trying to use language that isn't really mine, that doesn't connect with me, that doesn't resonate with me? Am I letting other people drive the types of meetings I'm having and that I'm loading onto my calendar? If you're the type of person who does best in the afternoon, then maybe have some of those really important meetings in the afternoon instead of loading your calendar on the early end with meetings that you know are going to take a little bit more brain power, are going to take a little bit more energy from you. You know how you work best. Build your calendar to support that. Regardless, sometimes you'll come in and cabinet will say, well, we always have cabinet meeting or ET meeting or whatever it is you call it on Wednesdays at noon. Well, maybe Wednesdays at noon aren't the best time for you as a leader. Maybe you do better on Monday mornings to get the week started, or maybe you do best on a Thursday afternoon to wrap up the week. So stay true to yourself and to your leadership style. Trust me when I tell you that your team will adjust to your leadership style. It's just like when you are a new principal coming into a campus, especially following maybe a beloved principal. Yeah, there were some things you had to do that made people feel comfortable, but then you learned very quickly how to personalize them and make them your own. So don't step away from a formula you already know. Be authentic and true to yourself. Now, my second tip is go slow to go fast. And a lot of you have heard this before. A lot of you have actually used this before. It is absolutely true. I have gone through a number of leadership transitions, especially when you get new superintendents into an organization. And one of the pitfalls that I see a lot of them make is going so fast to make change. One, because maybe the board has asked them of it, or two, maybe because they know that's exactly what the system needs for student success. And absolutely every day we miss is a day that may put more blocks in front of students and their growth, but sometimes we have to just come in and listen. And we always talk about a listening tour. Many of us build town halls and forums, and even internally with our teachers. And we go to each campus and have brown bag lunches with our teachers to find out what it is they're wanting to share with us. And all of that is great, but we got to make sure that we're taking time to process it, to analyze that against data, and to build out systems that we think people will be able to adjust to, honoring how they feel. Because if you are following a leader that has been in the seat for a really long time, there's likely some grieving that has to happen for people who have lost some of those long standing relationships. Or maybe people just have to process something that happened that was traumatic to the system. I'm dealing with school districts all over the country who have become who have found themselves in very toxic situations, work environments. And so there comes some grief with that and processing through it. So going too fast oftentimes disrupts the system so much that it paralyzes everything and everyone. That's not to say that you don't need to come in and make changes immediately, because absolutely sometimes changes have to be made, especially when we're talking about safety and security, or we're talking about the health and well-being of students and staff members. If it's a safety issue, we absolutely have to make changes, and we have to make them quickly. But if it is a culture issue, we need to honor some of the previous culture and the previous leadership's work, while still adjusting it and molding it into our leadership style. So that's really important. I want you to remember that going fast is wonderful. It comes with some benefits, but sometimes going slow to go fast is the key, because it honors everyone's input and it makes people stop and think and observe you and how you listen to people and how your style is going to affect them. Now, part of going slow to go fast, we talked about data, is really understanding what people are thinking and how they feel. Some of you have already used great survey tools in place. You're using SurveyMonkey. You're using some other products that you have. Sometimes you're doing in-house focus groups and brown bag luncheons to gather data, and you're taking notes. And that's fantastic. That is a great way to do it. Look for trends, look for themes, identify them, but more importantly, share them with people so that they know that you are paying attention to what they're saying, that you're engaging with them. And then when you do something with it, or you've used that data to make a change, you share what that change is so that people can see that you are using the information they gave you to move the district forward. Because if you just keep all that information to yourself, they're going to start to wonder and question whether or not you are listening. And number two, if you really care. So make sure that when you are implementing some new initiatives or projects, that you are honoring the data that was provided to you by stakeholders, both internally and externally. And that's probably a really great time to pause for just a second and recognize our official podcast sponsor, K12 Insight. They do a phenomenal job. They have a suite of tools and resources that support two-way engagement, that help school districts identify themes and topics and forecasts so that you can adjust your communication and potentially adjust some of your strategy. So if you are looking for a suite of tools that can help your school district with community engagement and listening and being able to measure sentiments and culture, I highly recommend you reach out to my friends at K12 Insight. You can visit them at k12insight.com/SOPHER. Let them know Veronica sent you, and one of their great sales team members will reach out and connect. So going back to why survey data is so important and insight is so important, because it helps you to understand where you're at, what the benchmark is, right? So now you can start measuring whether or not you're moving the needle. Maybe culture and climate is something that the board really wants you to address as you're coming in. So how are we going to measure that? How are we going to measure it monthly? How are we going to measure it quarterly? Those are the kinds of questions you need to be asking and make sure you've got tools in place. So the last tip is being vulnerable. And you've heard us talk about it. I've already talked about why showing up authentically is important, but being vulnerable is also very important. Brene Brown talks a lot about that and leading from the heart and some of the other resources that she's put out there. But one of my things that I see a lot is when people decide they want to be vulnerable, they actually make people a little uncomfortable because they're sharing just a little too much. So being vulnerable does not mean telling your entire life story and really pulling people into a part of your personal life that is not directly related to your growth. Now, that's not to say you can't share stories and traumas and things that really resonate with something that's happening in your system, but you've got to be able to tie it through and thread it through how you were able to use that to move on to where you're at and get you to a different mindset or how it improved a situation. It's a really good opportunity for you to make connections with people when you're vulnerable, but we don't want to overshare to the point to where people start to question whether or not you are professional. So as she says in her books, you don't have to share every dark skeleton in your closet, but giving people a sense of how you have leveraged some of the challenges that you've had in your life really help them understand that you're in it for the right reasons, that you are leading from the heart, that you are using data, that you are trying to tap into those lessons learned and how it's helped you grow as a leader. We've all had challenges. It's okay to talk about some of the physical challenges you've had or some mental health issues that you may have experienced in your family, as long as you directly tie it to a solution that's going to help them see how you have seen a path forward for your organization. So showing up authentically, going slow to go fast, and being vulnerable are some of the easiest ways you can deal with conquering resistance as you come into a new system. And sometimes you just have to give people time. Sometimes you have to give them time so that they can get to know you. I always tell people that if you've got a couple of things in your back pocket that you could easily pull out those first few days, number one, meeting as many people as you can, showing up with a smile, showing up with sweets or treats or, any of those things that speak to your personality are going to be really, really important. Listen, don't bring a stack of cookies if you're not a baker and you don't enjoy it or it doesn't feel natural to you. Don't spend hours and hours and hours trying to buy people's love. Just show up as yourself. If you like a particular type of pop culture item like Superman or something like that, go ahead and be who you are. Share your passion for comic books or share your passion for Harry Potter or whoever it is that you are. Show up authentically. People will love you for it. What they don't want is to see a leader who is coming in trying to fit into a system that isn't theirs yet. So take heed, enjoy the time that you have this summer as you're transitioning into your new leadership role. Maybe you're in the same system, but just at a different campus or in a different role. Maybe you're at central office now. Use those same strategies you would use when you were coming in as a new educator. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this episode of School Leader Soundbites. If you have any questions or want to learn more about how I work with school systems, maybe doing some one-on-one coaching or retreat facilitation, you know where to find me. I'm at veronicavsofer.com. So with that, I'm going to remind you to hit subscribe. We don't want you to miss any episodes of School Leader Soundbites. And if you are watching on Facebook or YouTube, drop some comments so I can be sure to connect with you. And we'll check you next time.